Hi there, and welcome back to the HVAC Controls Fundamentals series. You're really in for a real treat today. Over the course of the next 30 minutes, you're going to learn about control software and how to secure your BAS. Before we get into it, a few housekeeping items. First off, please ask questions in the questions tab. Again, this is a 30-minute session, and Grant, Charlie, and myself will stay on for an additional 15 to 20 minutes to answer as many questions as we possibly can. Next, you can access a PDF of today's presentation on the Handouts tab. And lastly, if you haven't already, please follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. Here you'll find all the latest news, product releases, updates, and more. And so in case we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Stephanie Shahowski. I am the Regional Sales Manager for Southern California. And with me, we have Grant Butler, Regional Sales Manager for New York City. And we have a new face today. Please welcome Charles Serba. He is the Sales Support Engineer for the West region. And without further ado, I'm going to turn over to Grant to get this controls party started.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, we have a good session in store for today. We're looking to cover some software features that you should be on the lookout for within control systems, be able to talk with ownership about, and make sure that they're getting the systems that they're looking for. There's a lot of new features out there that can really enhance the functionality of a BAS system, so you should be aware of those. We'll talk through how you can secure your BAS building automation system, look at the difference between unmanaged and managed switches, and then finalize the conversation by revisiting BACnet SC and APIs for a little bit further of a discussion. For those that weren't able to make the session that we previously talked about APIs, this piece we're going to take it one step further and compare it to BACnet Secure Connect. So APIs are application programming interfaces, and we'll give some more details once we get to that slide. So in terms of software features, you should be on the lookout and be talking about with owners, understanding what they want within their controller product line. You really want to build around the fact that there's now a lot of ways to have greater connectivity with your building automation system, whether that's through apps, services, the cloud. You want to understand what of those features they're looking for. Do they want remote access, dashboard displays, other things? And then look at how the building automation system data can be used by other individuals besides just the facilities team. So a lot of times now owners want to have more direct access to the data of their building automation systems. They want to be able to push that data over to energy managers, have them analyze, is their building performing at peak performance where it should be? Is there some ways to squeeze some more savings out of their energy bills by fine-tuning the building automation system? So being able to leverage that data, not let it just live on your site, is really important to having a good operational facility, not only from the energy standpoint, but also from the productivity standpoint. So it helps with your facilities team to not always be running out to the site. If they can monitor a few things remotely, they can have access to other ways to access the BAS data. So that's very helpful. And some of the technology that we're showing here, such as cloud connectivity, RESTful APIs towards building apps, Bluetooth technology towards making more productivity enhancing features and engaging with occupants. All these things are super helpful for taking your building automation system to the next level. So it's no longer just something that is a needed thing to run your HVAC equipment. It's becoming that catch-all for other operational technologies within your building. So you want to be able to leverage what you have there in a unique way. And so aligning with ownership and having these discussions on what technology they would like to see, whether it's to the extreme of using Bluetooth technology for wayfinding, or just something more along the lines of nice graphics and trending functionality and preloaded applications. These are discussions you should be having. So a lot of different technologies that we're showing on this slide that you might want to have discussions with ownership towards. And if you ever need help towards furthering those conversations or speaking towards how the technology works, all of us on the DizTech team are really happy to help out with those conversations. You guys have anything you want to add to onto this specific slide with the technology?
Like all things technology, including building automation, it's definitely always evolving. So definitely stay in tune with your local DizTech rep, who can kind of keep you updated on all the latest trends in the industry.
Yeah. So taking it to the next level, like I said, you're looking for features that help with your productivity, help with your energy savings, engage your occupants. So I'll start on the left-hand side. This is showing a auto commissioning feature that is going through and checking VAV boxes, checking your equipment, making sure that it's operating the way that it should be. So is the air valve on that VAV box leaking? Is the heater operational the way it should be? So having this feature available really reduces the time for your commissioning process. And taking it one step further beyond just your day one after install and your commissioning, you want to think about continuing to maintain your building for the next 10 plus however many years you're going to have that building automation system. A lot of times you'll see that equipment is not always operating the way that it was originally installed after a few years. So you want to be able to continue to commission that system, ensure that it's working the way that it should be. That's going to reduce a lot of your hot cold complaints and problems that you may run into, and it's also going to help with your energy bills to keep that building operating the way it was intended on day one, and not letting it drift off into a less energy efficient building. What we're looking at over on the right hand corner is a customized dashboard. Dashboards are really helpful for quickly understanding what's going on in your building. This one was specifically geared towards COVID and understanding the safety of the building, how many air changes you have, if you have UV light equipment within your HVAC, is it operational? Are there any spaces that the equipment filters need changed, etc.? That's a quick, easy way to make people feel more comfortable about how the building's performing. Maybe that's something you put up directly in your lobby as people enter, so that they know that the building is maintaining the safety that they're looking for going back to the workplace. Then finally, in the bottom right corner, what we're looking at is some occupancy-based data. So this is using Bluetooth technology or any other occupancy detecting technology to understand one, workplace productivity, movement, where people are. So you could use that towards understanding if your office layout is correct in the way and the right size for your office. And then also for disease transmission right now, it's a great way to understand the hot spots in your office where people are going to be crossing paths a lot, and maybe find ways to relay out your desk layout, stuff like that, to help with this current situation we're in right now with COVID.
Mm-hmm. Even help where certain areas, high traffic areas, or people are congregating might need extra cleaning, or where, you know, if an area hasn't been occupied, you know, maybe it doesn't need the proper thorough cleaning. So there's a lot of different applications that you can use your BAS for that are reaching far more than we would have ever imagined.
Yeah. Yep. So these are just a few examples of where the technology can take you. So it's important to stay in tune with that, understand, and be able to explain that to owners so that they can better decide on what's important to them for their buildings. So next, we're going to look at securing your building automation systems. This is really, really important. You don't want to slip up on the security of your system. Getting hacked through the BAS system is something that has happened in the past, and there's a report even in 2019 that 31% of organizations have experienced cyber attacks directly through the operational technology. So that's lighting systems, building automation systems, all the operational side of things, where maybe there isn't as compromising data like there is on the IT side, but cyber attacks are looking to find their way over to the IT side where they can get credit card information and more data along those lines. So you really want to make sure that you have the right security in place so that cyber attacks don't get through your BAS system, and you definitely don't want them to be able to move back and forth between networks within your building, your system. So Target was an example of that. Back in 2013, they experienced a hack that found its way through an operational technology system, and ultimately they lost credit card information for a lot of people. It was a very, very, very big ordeal, and it was because proper security wasn't put in place. There wasn't segmenting of networks. There wasn't any of the proper security protocols that you should put in place there. So a hacker was able to make their way from one network over to the IT and steal that credit card information. So looking at what we have high level on this slide, it's there's a few different ways that you can start to secure your network. I think segmenting networks is a good thing to look at. There are a few different ways to do it. So you can separate networks completely. So we talked about whether you reside on the customer network or you have your own separate network for the building automation system. This is what we're gearing towards. If you don't have the right coordination with the IT team and you're not able to do the right coordination, a lot of times that separate network is helpful towards the security side of things. And then there are other ways to segment, such as VLANs and subnets. So these are ways of ensuring that traffic stays where it's supposed to be within your network. You're not able to jump from your IT side over to your operational and back. It's keeping traffic where it should be, and that way any hacks are kind of segmented to that location. Firewalls, Ethernet switches, and additional IT security methods. So firewalls are really a great way to block off security threats. We'll talk more about what firewalls do and how they're set up, where they live in the next slide or two. Managed Ethernet switches. These are all ping words within this bullet point that I just want you to remember and be thinking about. And hopefully you have these within your specs as things to look for. So wanting a firewall, wanting a managed Ethernet switch. Additional IT methods that we have mentioned here is FIPS is a cryptographic method of further encoding your data so that it's not going to be easily translated for someone that's looking to hack into the system. A lot of governments use that. HTTPS and SSL are security when passing information from one device to the next or from a device to the web. WPA2 is referring to Wi-Fi and your security with Wi-Fi. So you do need to think of things a little bit differently from a wired to a wireless network, and having the right authentication for people trying to join that network is definitely very important. Then we also talked about radius as a way of authenticating from a central point. So those are some ping words you should keep a lookout for and be asking about whenever you're talking with controls vendors, and understand how to incorporate those into your specifications. And then there comes the simple stuff, passwords. It's not too complicated. Make sure you change your password, have detailed passwords. Don't use the defaults that are given to you. You need to change them. Multiple users. These are pretty easy methods to help with the security of your system.
Yeah, easy, but I'd say extremely overlooked. Definitely, as Grant said, change the default username and password. You can't believe how many customers have the same username and password as that default manufacturer uses. So step one, change that. And then each user should have a distinct username and password. You can also assign different access levels for different users within your system. So maybe some only get view-only privileges, where some are able to make different adjustments and overrides. And then lastly, if anyone leaves the organization, definitely delete their username, so they can't. You don't want a disgruntled employee trying to sabotage your building management system, and it's been done before. So just those things are hugely important as well.
Yep. And keep in mind, updates to the software and firmware, a lot of those updates do have security features included in them to continue to make the system more secure. So you do want to stay up to date with your software and firmware as cyber attacks continue to change every year. So does the software and firmware to protect against it. So this is a nice little graphic to understand how to protect your building security, and I like it. Protecting the castle this is a nice little unique graphic to understand some of the things that go into it. Whether it's the amount of ports, so the Ethernet plugs that people are able to plug into, limiting that access, to firewalls, to segmenting the network with subnets like we talked about. These are all different methods that are around your castle to protect it. Charlie, you have any added pieces towards maybe intrusion detection and other processes that are in place with that?
Yeah, so one advantage of setting up an OT network that's separate from your IT is if you do use something like intrusion detection, you can set rules, and what it does is it monitors the traffic on the network, and if it sees something that looks suspicious, it can either report it to you, or if you have intrusion prevention system set up, it may actually kick that device off the network temporarily until someone can come in and look at it. So with a OT network, machine-to-machine communication is usually pretty consistent, whereas communication between IT devices like someone's laptop, they may be going from Outlook to using a web page, and they may jump to YouTube and be streaming, so the network traffic can vary greatly. Whereas when you have machine-to-machine communication, it's usually pretty consistent and very predictable. So it makes it very, I wouldn't say very, but it makes it a lot easier to monitor machine communication and look for anomalies or abnormalities that would be something that may be suspicious. So it makes it a lot easier just to monitor it. And if you see something that looks suspicious, it's easier to pick it up quickly and either stop it or report it to someone to go look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, definitely. So few things, that quick hitter things I also want to point out before we move on to the next slide, that are helpful to keep in mind is you want to be able to encrypt everything. You want to be able to authenticate everything, and you want to keep processes in place to continue to check your security of your system. So whether it's checking to make sure people update their password every so often, or just continuing to make sure that system is secure. Those are all things that you want to keep in mind when setting up your system to ensure the security of it. Really, your IT security begins with proper network design. So your cybersecurity starts with the proper network design, and you really want to be working with companies that take it very seriously, because it can really turn into a big issue, like with the target hack that I described before. You don't want to be on the other side of that, where it was around a poor design, poor BAS setup. So working with companies that take it seriously, continue to update, they have guidelines towards ensuring the security of their system, processes in place, is really helpful to ensure that you have a nice secure system and that you're not going to run into any of those issues. So looking at this slide that we have here, this is just showing what the architecture looks like from the building automation side of things. So we showed the castle before, but I think you need to better understand what devices and what physically is in this system to have the security that we're talking about. So some things to think about when we're looking at this is that, one, you don't want to have your BMS directly exposed to the internet. So what we were showing here is that there's a firewall in place, which is usually part of a router. And then also we're using a VPN as a way to securely access through that firewall. So no direct exposure to the internet. We have something in place to prevent unwanted attacks. If you do have outside access that you're requiring, that's where this VPN comes into play. If you're going to keep everything local at your site, you don't need remote access or any of that. VPNs are not going to be part of that. But if you are trying to have remote access, that's what a VPN comes in for. Understand what the design intent of the customer is so that you can really align this system in the right way, and you understand what should be coming, what kind of communication they want, whether they do want inbound, outbound, do they need access to apps, cloud services. These are all very important for properly laying out your architecture from day one. And one final thing I want to point out before I move on to further detailing each individual piece here is that work with that, if you can, working with vendors that have API technology available, RESTful API, that's another way of having secure communication, and that can be a helpful way to set up your system in a secure way. Utilizing APIs, they're very secure data exchange. They started on the IT side of things back in the early 2000s, so they're widely accepted by the IT industry as a secure, authenticated form for communicating. So having that technology available is really helpful, depending upon the way you want to set up the security around your system. So looking at the firewall, like I said, it's really meant to block traffic. It has rules in place to stop hackers from getting through to your network. It's not entirely intelligent on with the typical setup on the ports and making sure that they're open or closed and how people get access. It's definitely there preventing a lot of those brute force attacks. And this is your outer wall of protecting your system. Whenever you're looking for remote access, what a VPN does is it's providing a secure encrypted tunnel through that firewall so that you're able to have remote access from outside of your facility if you want to, check on your building automation system or feed information out to a cloud or other services. So having that proper setup, you need to ask the questions on what that's going to look like with the customer. Some customers have VPN services that they prefer to use themselves. Others are going to be relying on you to come up with some solutions if they want remote access. So you're going to need to think about the right way to set that up. What I've seen is it's usually best to have products that have two-factor or dual-factor authentication. So just like your banking account on your cell phone, a lot of times it will send a text to your phone to confirm that it's you. That's the same style technology you want to be looking for with a VPN. You want to ensure that people that are trying to access the system are authenticated. They're the ones that are actually supposed to be accessing it. So some solutions that are available. It is kind of dependent upon what the customer is looking for, what their IT team is used to working with. There are products that have a really nice combined solution, such as TossiBox. If you want, we can talk more about that solution in the questions phase. So, moving on to what's actually in your building. So this is really looking at everything in your building. You do want to segment different networks. So your lighting should be separate from your controls, should be separate from your security system. They should all have their own subnets that they live on. That helps with security, ensures the communication stays where it should be within those networks. Keeping track of the ports that you have open. So if you can see here, all the ports that are being used are shown in gray, but then all the other ones that aren't being used right now, we have locked out. They're red. They're locked out, so if anyone tried to plug into that system, their MAC address wouldn't be recognized. They aren't supposed to be accessing through that port, so they won't be able to just plug in and immediately access the rest of the system. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the port security right at those switches. We talked about making sure that you're working with manufacturers that take this seriously. And then finally, utilize technology directly at the controllers to help with the security as well. So controllers that are able to use advanced encryption 256, they have transport layer security, they're using HTML5, they have FIPS available. These are all good ping words and buzzwords that you should be on the lookout with control technology to ensure that you really have a robust, secure system. Looking at VLANs, so virtual local area networks are another way of segmenting your network. As you can see here, we have a lighting system segmented from the security and from the security cameras. So what that does is you're segmenting those different networks. And the cool part about VLAN specifically is you don't have to limit it to the switches. You can have VLANs. So as you can see here, we have some of the lighting and the access control all on this same Ethernet switch, but they're on separate VLANs. You're segmenting the communication traffic between those networks, but they're still able to be connected back to the same Ethernet switch. So that's a helpful setup. It allows for a lot easier of troubleshooting. You're going to understand where the communication traffic is going with these different VLANs networks. Best practice, it's not a hard rule, but it's something to try to stick to, is no more than 250 devices per VLAN. That helps you with understanding traffic flow and really optimizing your system performance. Looking at network switches are also really important to the security of your system. So there are unmanaged switches, which have very little security features within them. And then there are managed switches. So you need to understand the difference between these two. On the managed switch side, you're able to set up those VLANs. You're able to provide the port security, lock out ports for people that shouldn't be accessing. You're able to better understand where the traffic is building up in your system and utilize that straight through an easy to understand graphical interface dependent upon the managed switch system that you're working with. So really helps with you understanding what is going on with your network and setting up a secure system in a simple way.
Yeah, in one of our previous sessions, Grant and I really described the differences from MSTP controllers to IP controllers, and a lot of differences, including communication speed being one of them. However, some lessons learned I know our system integrators have experienced are, I've heard of some attempts where, our BAS contractor put in unmanaged switches and was wondering why their IP-based, controller system was slow and clumsy. And after our support engineer, helped them with some troubleshooting, we realized they had installed all unmanaged switches and just things weren't working properly. So we definitely recommend, if you're a consulting engineer, specifying managed switches. We can help get you that verbiage. Or if you're one of our system integrators on here, of course, put in the managed switches. It'll make your life a lot easier. Charlie, you probably had experience. Any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a big difference between a lot of the unmanaged switches and managed, also the horsepower that's behind them. So think of it like buying a really inexpensive computer that has low performance specs and then asking it to do a task that it's not capable of doing or it's not powerful enough doing. It may be able to do it, but it's going to be really slow and take a lot longer time, whereas a managed switch has that horsepower in it to where when you start adding a bunch of devices, it's not going to have an issue handling all that network traffic.
Yep. And with managed switches, they have some different features in place that can help with traffic blocking, overload protection, and you're going to easily see where your data traffic is with network logging info. So very helpful to understand your network performance, and that way you know that your building automation system is operating the way it should be, and it's very secure the way it should be. So the final thing that we're going to look at here is BACnet SC, Secure Connect versus APIs, Application Programming Interfaces. This is a good little comparison here. What I'm showing on this slide is the executive summary from BACnet SC, the Secure Connect, and describing what the system was brought about for. So essentially, BACnet realized that there had a lot of security flaws with their communication, mostly around the fact that, BACnet was originally designed not fully intending to have a lot of connection to IT systems. It was, standalone local area control within your building. But as they started to connect with the IT side more, apps are getting created. People want remote access, cloud access, all these different things. The IT security around the communications becomes ever more important. So BACnet recognized that they had some security flaws. That's why they've been working with making this secure connect technology. It's something that they're going to have rolled out here, and you're going to see BAS manufacturers picking up very soon, within the next, I guess, year or so, I would assume, with this technology. And it's helping with the IT security of your system, and it's also helping with allowing easier setup for IT side of things with cloud technology and these apps and everything else that you're seeing BAS systems get used towards. So definitely keep an eye out for BACnet SC. But what I wanted to point out here is comparing it to APIs. So APIs have already kind of been around since the early 2000s. They are widely accepted by the IT community as a secure, authenticated, encrypted form of communication. So it is kind of an interesting thing to think about. APIs can already fulfill a lot of what BACnet SC is trying to move towards with their form of communication. So you may see a mix of usage between those two in the future, or possibly move towards APIs. So definitely something just to be aware of, that you do get that same level of security through APIs with as well. So that's the kind of final little comparison that I wanted to do here. And I guess we can look to open it up to questions. Say thank you for everybody that's joined. Hopefully you can stick around for the questions. If not, we'll want to see you on Thursday.
Yeah, before we jump into questions, again, we have our final session on Thursday. Our Director of Technical Support and Training, Sam Sharma, is going to be leading that one, and that's going to be under the hood, looking at the controls user interface. So it's going to be a great session. So for those of you who have to leave, we'll see you Thursday. If not, stick around and let's get into some questions. All right, Charlie, let's see here. Here's a great question. Do you know if BACnet SC is a firmware update based around existing hardware, or is it going to require all new or some additional hardware?
For this for the Eclipse product line, it will most likely just be a firmware update. The only part that I still don't know and I can't speak on is there is a gateway device, or what they call a broker, involved with BACnet SC, and as of today, I don't know where that broker will reside. So it may be a piece of software you load on site, or it may be a physical device that you'd have to add to the system, but the existing Eclipse controllers will support talking BACnet SC.
Got it. So with the modern Eclipse IP product, you could use your existing infrastructure, but you might have to add one additional piece of hardware and update the firmware in the existing.
Correct.
Yeah, but for BACnet MSTP, it's important to note that there's definitely additional hardware that needs to be in place to try to secure that system. So the MSTP technology, there will be a hardware device that goes in to try to secure everything there.
Got it. All right, here's a great question. What's the biggest bang for your buck security feature to implement? Like, I guess, Charlotte, if you had to name the top one or maybe top three things, what would you say? Oh,
man, that's a good question. If you're starting with a new infrastructure, I would say managed switches. Optigo definitely makes it easy to use what they call their one-click secure. And what it does is a big difference between Optigo and some of the other manufacturers is that, can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. A big difference between Optigo and some of the other manufacturers is Optigo makes it where you have one graphical user interface that you log into. And when you log in there, it manages all the switches connected to that system. Versus in some of the other traditional systems, you'd have to go to each switch to set them up. With Optigo, they also offer a one-click secure. So once you've added all your devices in the network, you can click that one-click secure, and any existing MAC address plugged into the system will be locked to the port that it's talking to. And if any port is not plugged into anything, then those ports will be locked down to where nothing new will be allowed to plug in. So it makes it real simple to implement the MAC address filtering and port security. As far as the second one, an easy one you could do on an existing system is validate passwords. Just go through and make sure your passwords are strong, and it don't think of the traditional method where they say, oh, you got to put an @ symbol and a special character, and you have to. It is good to have a long password, but if you make a password that's hard for you to remember, but it's 8 characters and all these random numbers and letters, a computer can usually guess an 8-character password fairly quickly, as compared to you trying to remember it. So it's better to make a long password that's easy for you to remember. You could set up a password that my left shoe is green, and a computer would take forever to brute force that password because it's so long, but yet it's easy for you to remember. So simple things like that really help to secure a system against brute force attacks that use password crackers.
Mhm.
Awesome. That was 2. What's your third?
Oh man, a third one. Validate firewalls. So make sure that if you have, it'd be similar to device hardening, is to make sure you have firewalls installed. And then with those firewalls, make sure that if you have ports that are open that aren't being used, maybe shut those ports down, or instead of just shutting them down, as you can go in, and most firewalls allow you to set up, hey, if this application tries to use this port, allow it, but if something else tries to talk on this port, then don't allow it to talk. So that's another way to just make sure that the traffic coming through that firewall is traffic you want to allow through versus just letting anything talk on it.
Mhm.
It's a great answers, Charlie. So one thing you mentioned, I'll add on a little bit. You mentioned Optigo switches and some features there. So if you guys aren't familiar with Optigo branded switches, they make networking gear that's geared towards operational technology. So BAS specifically. So you can get more info on them, and they do a lot of great webinars and videos on their website. It's optigo.net. So definitely check that out. All right, let's take a look at some other questions here. I think you answered it, Charlie, but maybe you can go into more detail. What security mechanisms are in place to prevent someone from unplugging a cable from an active port and like plugging in a new cable and accessing the system, or plugging something into an open port?
So that would be the MAC address filtering. So every computer has a MAC address, and think of it kind of like your home address, where if you sell a house, that home address doesn't change. It's always tied to that house. So your MAC address is an address that's a physical address of that device. So when you plug a device in, the managed switch is smart enough to know what MAC address is. Well, any switch is smart enough to know what MAC address is there. What we can do with the managed switches is tell it that if you unplug that device and the MAC address changes of the device that's plugged in, then it'll deny it access into the system. Or if the port's open and nothing's plugged in, then it can say that port is just shut off, there's nothing on it. So then if someone did try to plug in, it would just block them from communicating.
Yep.
So one of our first questions, Charlie, you answered over chat, but maybe you can go into more detail. And this refers back to software. Can you please discuss more about Distech's new auto commissioning software?
Yeah. So the auto commissioning tool is something that it's a piece of code that resides in the edge device or in the Eclipse controller. And right now we have it for the VAV units or variable air volume units and for fan cool units. And what it'll do is on the VAVs, it'll check the air valve test. So it'll check for reverse damper. It can actually auto-correct a reverse damper if it sees it. It looks for airflow leakage on the minimum and on the maximum. And then it looks at whether the damper is not moving or obstructed or stuck. And then with the reheat test, we can actually check the temperature coming out of the VAV box before the test, and then it will turn on the reheat for a given period of time, and then it'll record the temperature coming out and validate that the heat's actually working. And same if you have perimeter heat, is it can turn the perimeter heat on and then wait a given period of time, and it'll check the room temperature to see if it got a rise in room temperature, and it'll flag it as either passed or failed. And the really nice part about it is it's set up to where you can run it on a live system without tripping any alarms. So you could set this up and have it every Friday. It runs the commissioning report, or once a month it goes there and runs that commissioning report. And when it gets done, it'll automatically email you. If you set it up to do so, you can have it automatically email the report to you, and it'll say which VAVs passed and what tests they passed and which tests they failed.
Sounds awesome. So that sounds like a great feature. What product line is that for, and how much does it cost?
So it's for the Eclipse product line, and the best part is it's free. So if you have Eclipse controllers currently, you can add it into the system. There would be labor involved to go add that into the system if you wanted to add it, but there's no cost associated with it. It'd just be grab the packets from Smart Installer, which is our software tool that gets you all the Distech files, and then put it on your system and let it run.
I think my internet broke up. Did you say it's free, or how much was it?
It is free.
That's amazing. It's a great feature. If you're a system integrator, check it out. If you're a consulting engineer, we'd be more than happy to talk to you more about that. All right, and I think we're at time, and we answered the majority of the questions here. Please feel free to reach out to Distech if you have further questions. Again, you can go to our website, distech-controls.com, click on resources, consulting engineer, and you can schedule your own personalized lunch and learn. But without further ado, that's a wrap, you guys. Please join us Thursday for our final session. And we hope you learned a lot through the course of these 5 sessions, and the next one's going to be a great one. So thank you.
Thanks, guys.